Hello and welcome to another session of the Unisky training platform. Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel, and if you've not done so, please try to subscribe for more videos. In today's lecture, we are going to look at how to install Windows Server on a virtual platform via Hyper-V. In one of the videos I previously uploaded, I took you through we explained how to install Hyper-V and then configure it for use. So we would use that particular pre-configured Hyper-V to create a virtual machine, and then we install the Windows Server on it. Now, the scenario we would base on is this. We are assuming you are a network administrator for a company and you have just one physical server, but you are required to deploy services such as FTP for an ASP.NET and then MySQL server application, and also run other server based services. Now, you are supposed to deploy this particular service on a server operating system besides the single physical server you have. So your only option is to deploy everything virtually. That is why we would rely on the Hyper-V for this particular solution. So now once you are connected to your physical computer, we assume we already have the Windows Server installed on our physical computer. And mind you, you could also enable Hyper-V on a Windows 10 computer. So you realize that I have a pre-configured machine here. I am going to delete it. I'm going to turn this one off, and then I'll delete it, and we will configure everything from scratch. So once you turn on Hyper-V, be it a Windows Server platform or a Windows 10 platform, you would have the Hyper-V enabled, and then you would have the same view, this particular view. So all you do is create your new machine. And now remember, you need to connect this particular machine to a network switch. So we can also create a virtual switch before we start configuring our machine. So it is ideal we set up our switch before we set up our machine, so that our machine would then be connected to the switch before we install the Windows. So we come to the virtual switch element there, and then we are given the window. Now there are three options: the external, internal, and private. The external simply means you are going to create a virtual switch that interfaces with the physical computer's network card. So you would be able to interact with computers within the physical environment from your virtual computer. And now with the internal, you are able to interact with both physical computers on your environment and then virtual computers within your Hyper-V scope. Then with the private, you are able to interact with machines that are set up virtually only. So for this particular purpose, because we want to be able to interact with other computers on our network, we could choose external. We could also choose the private, and then we would point the IP address we give this particular computer to the external switch. So it would depend on the type of service you want to deploy. But for this particular lecture, we want to do, say, a private switch. Then we create switch and we name our switch. So we say maybe FTP switch, and then we choose private, apply, and OK. Once our switch is created, we go ahead and create a new virtual machine. Now we can do that from the right pane. Then we select virtual machine, or we right click on our server name, come to new, and choose virtual machine. Each of them takes us to the same destination. The wizard appears, and then we go next. Now we choose a name for our virtual machine. Maybe we want it to be FTP SRV, FTP server SRV01. That is the name for our virtual machine. So we go next, and then we choose the architecture. Our Windows Server operating system resides on a 64-bit architecture. So we would have to configure our machine to respond to the hardware of a physical machine that has the components or a bus system of a 64-bit architecture. So we choose generation 2. The generation 1 resides or responds to an x86 architecture, which is the 32-bit. So we go next, and then we define the startup memory, the memory for our virtual machine. I would choose up to 4 gigabytes of RAM for my computer. It will also depend on the total amount of RAM you have on your physical computer. I have up to at least some amount of RAM there that I have 4 gig to spare. Now you could also choose dynamic, such that if your virtual machine is running out of virtual RAM memory, it will be able to reside on the host machine for more memory. So it will be prudent to select the use dynamic memory for this virtual machine. Then we go next, and then we choose the connection. Which switch do we want to belong to? So we want to belong to the switch we created, or the network we created, which is FTP switch. We choose that, and then we go next. These settings can be changed anytime, but it will be good or ideal you create it before you continue. Now the size of the hard disk comes. Of course, it will depend on the total size of or the capacity of your host computer's hard drive. So at default, for the service we are going to deploy, we'll need up to say 50 gigabyte of hard disk space for this particular purpose. So I choose 50 gigabyte, and then I go next. Now it is asking us for the location of our Windows image. I have put my Windows image in my documents here inside this folder called Windows Server. So we navigate to that particular location from our wizard. So we choose install an operating system from a bootable image, and we browse. So we locate documents, Windows Server, and we select the image. So once we select the image, we are good to go. We go next and we finish. Once we are done, our virtual machine is set up and ready to go. Now, to connect to the virtual machine, you can right click on it and you click on connect. So it previews another screen, or it opens another screen, giving us establishing a remote connection between our host machine to the virtual machine, such that we can be able to configure it from there. Now that our machine is ready, of course, we need to turn the power button on before we would be able to access the machine. So we turn the power button on from here, and because we have loaded the bootable CD, it is asking us to press any key to boot from CD, as you do with your USB or your CD with a physical machine. So it is loading the Windows files. Now, most of us, or most of those who have done Windows installation, should have seen this screen before. So we simply go next, install now. Again, the speed would depend on the RAM of your host machine. So with a typical server operating system, it is asking us, this is my image though, the image I have. It's asking us to install either a standard server version or a data center. We want to install a standard server. Now the standard server also comes in two folds. Pros would probably use the core installation, but for now, given our scale, we want to use the graphical user interface for the standard. If you use the core, it means you wouldn't have the GUI, that is a graphical user interface. Everything will be done via command. The PowerShell would be launched for you to use that in doing all your installations and configurations. In other videos, we'll be using only the command prompt, only the PowerShell to do some of the necessary configurations. But for this particular video, we are going to base on the graphical user interface. So we select that and we go next. Then we accept the terms. Of course, you need to accept the terms of Microsoft before you continue. So we choose custom because it's a new installation. Now you realize that we allocated 50 gigabytes of hard disk space to our machine. So it is there, but it is telling us the partition is unallocated. So we choose new and then we apply. Now we could change the size we want for the windows and maybe another partition for backup data or other stuff. But for now, we want to use the entire hard disk space for our windows. So we simply click on apply, then OK. Then now we go next. Now it will load and copy our Windows files and take us through the normal Windows procedure. So what I'm going to do is We would continue right after the files are loaded, and then we configure our server password and boot into the system.
Okay, so once your server files are loaded, it installs and gets to this particular stage. It is required that you enter a server password before you log on. So I recommend that you observe the complex password rules and then you choose your password. So I am entering my password, then I confirm the same thing, and then I click on finish. So once you are done, we press Ctrl Alt Delete. Okay, oops, we use the Hyper-V symbol there to insert Ctrl Alt Delete to the screen, right? So I now enter my password, and then it starts my server for the first time. So we give it some time. Now once you install it, it behaves as though it's a normal server machine. So you realize that the platform we have here is the same thing we have on this particular one too. And then you can deploy any type of server service you want to deploy on this particular platform. So this brings us to the end of this video, and then in the next video we will look at how to set up our FTP service, maybe DHCP service, DNS like domain controller and other stuff using this particular virtual machine. Thank you for watching, and remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. See you next time. Bye.